All right, let's just jump right in. I'm going to ask you a question today, and it might make you feel, well, a little uncomfortable, but it's something we all think about, right? Are you really following your dreams? So, to get into this, let's rewind the clock. I want you to really think back with me, all the way back to when you were just a kid. Go on, take a second. What was it for you? When I was a kid, I wanted to be a fireman. Total classic, I know. Maybe you wanted to be an astronaut or a doctor, maybe an artist. We all had these huge, exciting plans for our lives, didn't we? But then, life happens. Suddenly, you're in the adult world of jobs and bills and responsibilities, and those big dreams start to feel, well, kind of distant. And look, that's normal. There's this huge pressure to be practical, right? To get a stable job. And that pressure can just steamroll our own personal dreams. But what's interesting is that for some people, those dreams just don't fade. They make a choice, a conscious choice, not to let what everyone else expects of them run their lives. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. And that right there, that brings us to the very heart of this. Because what happens when we let those dreams slip away? What's the real cost, long term, of taking the safe path instead of the one we actually want? This is where the story gets, well, it gets really powerful. So, there was this Australian nurse, Bronnie Ware, and she spent years working with patients in their final weeks. She would just listen. She listened to their stories, their joys, their sorrows, and she ended up compiling all of their most profound thoughts into a book about their biggest regrets in life. So here's a question for you. Out of everything they could have regretted, what do you think their number one most common regret was? Was it A, I wish I hadn't worked so hard? Or maybe C, I wish I'd made more money? Or was it B, I wish I had followed my dreams? Go ahead, pick one. We're going to come back to this, I promise. The answer's waiting for us at the end. Okay, so to really understand what it means to live without that regret, we're going to look at two completely different stories. First up, we've got Daisy. She decided to build her dream by basically throwing out all the conventional ideas about work and money, and instead, she chose to create a community. So Daisy's big dream was to live in what you'd probably call a utopia. A perfect, ideal society where everyone's happy and works together. For most of us, that's something you only read about in books, right? But she found it. She found it in a real place called Riverside, a community down in New Zealand that was actually founded on the idea of peace. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the way Riverside's economy works, it completely flips our modern work culture on its head. I mean, they run real businesses, a farm, a hotel, a cafe, but all the money they make, it goes into one big community pot. And from there, it's shared out equally among everyone. Think about that. Your job title, how many hours you work, none of it changes your share. It's a system built entirely on supporting each other, not on getting ahead individually. And this just perfectly sums up their whole philosophy. Here's what Daisy says about it. She explains how this kind of radical sharing gives the entire group a massive advantage. It creates this safety net. It frees people from that constant money anxiety that drives so many of our choices out here in the real world. So here's the kicker. How do people on the outside see this? Well, Daisy says a lot of outsiders really struggle with the whole idea. They try to slap political labels on it, or they just think it's outlandish, totally strange and bizarre. And this just goes to show that societal pressure we were talking about, right? That resistance to anything that breaks the mold. But for Daisy and everyone at Riverside, it's not weird at all. It's just their happy, functional reality. All right, let's switch gears completely for our next story. Because not all dreams are about putting down roots and building a stable community. For the Zapp family, their dream was the polar opposite, to embrace total, complete uncertainty and live a life of nonstop adventure. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's mind-blowing. Back in 2000, Herman and Candelaria Zapp basically ignored every rule about starting a family and having a career. They left Argentina in this old vintage car with almost no money, planning for a trip that would last maybe 6 months. That 6-month trip turned into a 22-year journey. They had and raised 3 kids on the road, and they've now been to over 100 countries. They built their entire life not on a steady paycheck, but on faith in other people. And Herman's takeaway from this whole journey is just, wow. He says he's not the same guy who left all those years ago. He's not the man who wanted to conquer the world anymore. Instead, he says he was conquered by the world. Think about that shift in mindset. It's a complete flip from trying to control the world to letting the world change you. And the one word that really captures this change is humble. By letting go of having a master plan and just relying on the kindness of strangers, he moved past his own ego. He learned that real wealth in life, it doesn't come from control or from what you accomplish. It comes from connection and from experience. And he has this absolutely beautiful metaphor for it. He says he now sees himself as a beautiful, tiny piece of sand. Yeah, insignificant all by himself, but also a really important part of this massive, beautiful whole. I mean, what an incredible perspective to gain. And it all came from just having the courage to follow a crazy dream. So you have these two totally different dreams, right? One is all about community, the other about adventure. But they both needed one crucial ingredient: the courage to say, this is what success looks like for me, no matter what anyone else thought. So let's bring it all home and get back to that question I asked you at the beginning. Okay, time to go back to Bronnie Ware's research. After all those hours, all those conversations with people looking back at their entire lives, what was the number one thing they wished they had done differently? All right, the answer was essentially B, but the full quote is what really hits you. The number one regret of the dying is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And that tells us everything. The regret isn't just about missing out on a specific job or a trip. The real pain comes from a lack of authenticity, from realizing you lived your one life based on a script someone else wrote for you. And that's exactly what the stories of Daisy and the Zapp family show us so perfectly. They had that courage. They lived lives that were true to themselves. It doesn't matter if it was through building a community or being in constant motion. They chose their own path. They proved that it is absolutely possible to avoid having that number one regret. So, as we finish up here, I want to leave you with this one thought. Living a life that's true to yourself, it doesn't have to mean taking a 22-year road trip or moving to a commune, right? It starts with small steps, small acts of courage. So think about your own life. What is just one tiny thing, one small step you could take even today to start living a life that's a little more true to you?